In this edition of the show, we present a case study examining Britain's introduction of the 12A rating in 2002, as well as looking at Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy. Although much of this may be familiar to some of our viewers, we hope you find it an interesting and stimulating presentation. A trivia question for you. What was the first film past 12A in the United Kingdom? If you answered Spider-Man, then you'd be incorrect. The first film that was past 12A by the BBFC was Doug Liman's The Bourne Identity, which was classified on June the 24th, 2002. It's been said before that Spider-Man was the reason for the introduction of the 12A rating, but that is not the case. So what is the story behind the 12A rating? As we discussed in a previous episode of the show, in 1984 the MPAA in the United States introduced the PG-13 rating. Prior to this, there had been a rather large gap between the PG and R ratings, and as time went by, it became clear that some films fell into this void. The PG-13, an advisory rating, served to inform parents that a film's content was likely to be unsuitable for children under 13. However, a parent or guardian is not required to accompany a child to a PG-13 film. Across the waters in the UK, the BBFC introduced a similar rating in 1989 when the 12 certificate was introduced for cinema releases on August the 1st. Unlike the American PG-13, the 12 was legally enforced. No one under the age of 12 was permitted, even in the presence of an adult. The BBFC trialled the new rating in London for the first time with the release of John Schlesinger's Madame Susatska, although the film was officially past 15 uncut on March the 13th. The first film to receive the new 12 rating was Tim Burton's Batman, which was classified uncut on August the 22nd. The board's guidelines for 12 were rather stricter at the time of its inception. Regarding bad language, only one sexual expletive was permitted if it was contextually justified. To put that into context, a 12 film today is permitted about 4 uses, so long as they are not used aggressively and are, again, contextually justified. The British video industry rejected the idea of introducing the 12 rating for video works for many years. Expanding the law to include the certificate for video releases would require changes to the Video Recordings Act 1984, which would take time, but this was but one bone of contention for the video industry. As a result, movies that had been classified on film at 12 either had to be cut for PG on video or raised to 15. If you'd been to see Batman in cinemas for your 12th birthday, you couldn't legally purchase the exact same version of the film on video because it had been raised to 15. The situation frustrated the BBFC for years, as they remarked in their 1990 annual report.
The video industry still opposes the 12 as too permissive because on film it has been seen as revealing too flexible an attitude to swearing. They argue that 15 is preferable because it will prove sufficiently punitive to induce companies to cut the offending expletive to obtain a PG. The video public is surely badly served by a classification system which denies itself a category option which could solve this sort of problem, and which has proved itself such a welcome and helpful innovation in the cinema.
The necessary legislation was eventually passed, and the 12 certificate was finally introduced for video works on July the 1st, 1994. The 12 rating had proven itself highly successful in the UK throughout the 1990s, where a range of PG-13 Hollywood blockbusters found their natural audience on video, thanks to the BBFC's newest age certificate. But all was not entirely well. For some time, the board had been receiving complaints from parents who felt they were better suited to decide if a 12 film was suitable for their under-12s. A common example cited by these parents were the James Bond films, all of which had been past 12 since 1995, with parents content to let their 10 or 11-year-olds enjoy the fantastical nature of the series' violence and action. As a result, in 2000 the BBFC began to consider whether the 12 rating could be made advisory for cinema releases. As the BBFC's president Andreas Whittam-Smith stated in the BBFC's annual report of 2000,
"There are a number of reasons for considering such a change. Either side of 12 years, the maturity of children varies quite widely. Parents are the best judges of the degree to which a particular child is sufficiently robust to see material rated one step beyond U and the existing PG. Cinema managers too may have more difficulty in policing entry into 12-rated films than any other category. The appearance and size of a young customer can easily mislead as to age. It is also worth noting that the United Kingdom differs from most of Western Europe and North America in retaining a mandatory 12 rating. We have already raised these issues with the representative bodies of the local authorities, the exhibitors, and the distributors. All have expressed interest. Now we intend to press forward with further consultation and more precise plans. In the end, however, it will be public opinion which will have the decisive say.
Towards the end of 2001, the BBFC conducted a 2-month trial period in Norwich, where all 12-rated cinema releases were classified PG-12 and open to children under 12 as long as they were accompanied by an adult guardian. The opinions of the viewing public in Norwich and the surrounding areas were polled by the BBFC, and the general consensus was weighted strongly in favour of a new advisory category, on the proviso that all such films required an adult guardian to accompany children under 12, and that clear descriptions of a film's content were included in publicity materials. This idea was termed consumer advice by the BBFC and would be displayed in the form of a single sentence. For example, contains one use of strong language and moderate horror. Although the BBFC could not legally enforce this, they were hopeful that exhibitors and advertisers would be open to the idea. Following the PG-12 trials, the BBFC carried out a national survey in the May of 2002 asking cinema goers about the possibility of introducing the new rating. Over 70% of those polled were in favour of the idea and, although they were initially reluctant, cinema exhibitors agreed to displaying consumer advice on advertising materials. On August 30th, 2002, the BBFC introduced its new rating for cinema releases, which was now termed 12A. The rating immediately replaced the 12 rating on all currently available films in cinemas and would replace the 12 rating on classified films going forward. In terms of permitted content, the 12A rating is identical to 12, with the number indicating that the film is suitable for those 12 and over, and the A signifying that under 12 should be accompanied by an adult. So, that's a brief history of the introduction of the 12A rating. But where does Spider-Man fit into this? We know it wasn't the first 12A film, so why is the film so inextricably linked with the rating? Spider-Man was first submitted to the BBFC earlier in 2002, only a few months before the 12A was introduced, with a request from the distributors for a PG rating. But the BBFC refused to pass the film at PG due to the film's levels of personalised violence and its revenge theme. Two scenes in particular stand out as being particularly brutal, these being Spider-Man's attack on the carjacker and the final fight between Spider-Man and the Green Goblin. Here are a couple of clips to demonstrate the strength of the violence in these two sequences.
Don't hurt me. Just give me a chance. Just give me a chance! What about my uncle? Did you give him a chance? Did you? Answer me! Thanks. See ya.
offered you friendship, and you spat in my face.
The BBFC's decision, although quite clearly logical, confounded the distributors' expectations, which had already begun marketing the film to younger viewers. As the BBFC commented in their 2002 annual report,
advanced publicity and marketing can create an expectation that a film will get a particular rating, and the pre-publicity strongly suggested that this was going to be a children's film. However, the Marvel comic hero dealt out punishment in the film in a style that made a PG rating impossible, and at times challenged the 12 guidelines for violence. Many children who had collected the associated Spider-Man toys were inevitably disappointed when the film was released at 12. But the BBFC was in no doubt that the quality of the personal violence and the retribution theme placed the film towards the top of the 12 category, where it was contained by the fantasy context and its clear moral intentions.
Spider-Man was thus classified 12 uncut by the BBFC on April 15, 2002, and released on June 14th. The BBFC consumer advice on the film quite clearly stated the film's content, remarking that it contained some scenes of strong fantasy violence. Following its decision, the BBFC received 51 letters of complaint from members of the public, arguing that the film's rating should have been PG instead. The board stood by its decision, and some of the same members of the public later wrote back to the BBFC, remarking that they had changed their minds after seeing the film. The BBFC actually classifies films on behalf of UK councils, which have statutory responsibility for licensing local cinemas. Although rare, councils are free to overrule the BBFC's decisions on film, and after the publicity surrounding the 12 rating given to Spider-Man, 5% of local authorities bowed to protests from the public and issued the film with a PG rating or their own PG-12 rating, the latter of which was issued with a requirement that under 12s be accompanied by an adult. Following the successful introduction of the 12A rating, Columbia TriStar decided to re-release Spider-Man in British cinemas with this new rating, and TV commercials proudly boasted of the fact that under 12s could now see the film. Perhaps it is the memories of such a potent advertising campaign that leads people to believe that Spider-Man was the first 12A film, but the Bourne Identity beats it by 2 months. Today, Spider-Man remains at 12 on video for its strong violence. As a quick aside, consumer advice had been widely adopted by the British video industry since the mid-1990s in a colourful grid form, but it would go on to become widely used on cinema releases following the introduction of the 12A. Today, it is known as BBFC Insight and appears on the board's website and mobile app, advertising materials for all films and Blu-ray packaging. The 12A legacy lives on. Spider-Man 2 was released in 2004, and although the first film had passed uncut with a 12 rating, the situation regarding the sequel in Britain is interesting for different reasons. Before a formal submission, the filmmakers presented a rough cut of the film for an advice viewing to the BBFC, in order to see if any changes had to be made to the film to achieve their desired PG rating. Following this advice viewing, the BBFC informed the distributors that the sight of a brief headbutt delivered by Spider-Man to the film's villain Doc Ock would need to be removed. Here is how the original scene plays in the version first seen by the BBFC. It's a bit of a blink and you'll miss it shot, so pay close attention.
Hang
In order to facilitate this change, the filmmakers substituted the headbutt with some alternate footage that shows Spider-Man punching Doc Ock in the face.
Hang on!
Following the removal of the offending combat move, Spider-Man 2 was submitted to the BBFC for classification and was passed without further cuts on June 18, 2004, with a PG rating for moderate fantasy violence. Like its predecessor, Spider-Man 2 attracted some complaints following its release. In comparison to the first film, the complaints this time were centered on the film being classified a too low a rating. In response, the BBFC commented in their 2004 annual report that
when Spider-Man 2 came in to be classified, it was clear that the tone of the film was very different. It was lighter and had more comedy than the first film, and the violence had less impact owing partly to toned-down sound effects. Nevertheless, 20 people felt that it was too strong for PG. Presumably, these people agreed with the 12 rating for the first film.
However, the film was also submitted for an IMAX classification, a film format capable of displaying images at a greater size and resolution than conventional cinema systems. Although the film had been passed at PG for regular theatrical showings, the BBFC upgraded the film's rating to 12A specifically for IMAX showings, noting at the time that
when classifying a film for cinema release, the board carefully considers the impact of the special effects and soundtrack on the likely audience. In the case of Spider-Man 2, the board believes that the huge screens and powerful sound systems in IMAX cinemas, designed to deliver an intense cinematographic experience, mean that some young children may find the film more scary than they would if they saw it at a traditional cinema. The 12A rating for IMAX cinemas is designed to help parents with young or sensitive children to make sure that their trip to the cinema is not a distressing experience.
As a result, the cut PG version of Spider-Man 2 was classified 12A in IMAX format on August 25, 2004. The cut UK version was also submitted for a DVD classification and was passed PG on August 27th. Sadly, Columbia TriStar saw fit to release the cut UK version on DVD in almost all major territories, including Europe, Australia, and even Hong Kong. As a result, the United States is one of a small number of countries that received the uncut version on DVD. Additionally, a blooper reel was also dropped from the UK DVD special features, as this would have raised the overall rating to a 12 due to its bleeped strong language, but the feature was available on releases outside of Europe. From here on in, the home video situation around the world gets even more complex. To tie in with the release of Spider-Man 3, Sony Pictures released Spider-Man 2.1 on DVD in 2007, an extended cut of the original film. Although this extended version of the film consists almost entirely of additional exposition and non-contentious footage, it does restore at least one violent moment that may have been removed for a PG-13 rating. This very brief addition occurs during Doc Ock's destruction of the operating theatre. Here is the original version of the scene from the American theatrical release. The extended cut includes 2 additional shots of the man being electrocuted by the lamp, as this clip demonstrates. Spider-Man 2.1 was passed PG by the BBFC without cuts on April 2, 2007. However, this version of the film was pre-cut to remove the headbutt, and it was this version that was released on DVD throughout the world, including in the United States, where the incident had caused no classification issues back in 2004. In other words, all DVD versions of Spider-Man 2.1 from 2007 are missing the headbutt removed at the behest of the BBFC. Spider-Man 2 was later issued on Blu-ray in the UK as part of the Spider-Man High Definition Trilogy box set. This box set contained both Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 2.1, but the real bonus here was that both versions of the film were fully uncut and restored the headbutt missing from the previous releases. The two versions do not appear to have been passed uncut by the BBFC before the release of this box set, and this is further evidenced by the MPAA rating screen which plays before the film. It would appear that Sony simply used the uncut American master disc to press the UK Blu-rays. Spider-Man 2 was resubmitted in its PG-13 theatrical version to the BBFC, with the headbutt intact, for a new classification in 2009. With the BBFC having relaxed their internal rules about imitable techniques, the film was passed uncut with a PG rating on April 1st of that year. The Spider-Man trilogy was re-released on Blu-ray in 2012, and once again Sony included both the theatrical and the 2.1 extended version of the film, and even threw in the blooper reel missing from the original DVD release. Despite this, both versions of the film were missing the headbutt, in spite of the fact that the BBFC had waived the cut from the theatrical version in 2009. To sum up, here is the current home video situation regarding Spider-Man 2 and how you can get your hands on the uncut releases of both versions of the film on DVD or Blu-ray. On DVD, you can import the uncut theatrical version of the film on Region 1 from eBay.com or Amazon.com. We would recommend the Superbit version for its stellar picture quality and the DTS 5.1 soundtrack, although the special edition is recommended if you prefer the extra features and the blooper reel. There are no uncut DVD versions of the 2.1 extended edition that we're aware of. On Blu-ray, you can seek out the Spider-Man trilogy that was released in 2007. The UK release, with its blue cover, is region-free and has uncut versions of both cuts of the film. The American release from 2007 is also uncut and region-free, but the 2012 release is Region A locked. The mastered in 4K releases from America, Australia and Japan contain the theatrical version only, but they are all uncut. The 2012 release in Australia contains both cuts of the film, but it is missing the headbutt and should be avoided. Spider-Man 3 was released in the UK on May 4, 2007. Its classification at the hands of the BBFC was the most straightforward of Raimi's trilogy, with the BBFC passing the film uncut with a 12A rating on April 17, 2007, noting that the film contains strong fantasy violence and moderate horror. The film was later passed uncut with a 12 rating for DVD and Blu-ray on August 1, 2007, with the BBFC commenting in their annual report for that year that
many blockbusters aimed at a family audience are placed at 12A, and 2007 was no exception, with Spider-Man 3 finding its natural home here, and containing what was occasionally strong violence and threat, but in settings which were clearly fantastical.
The 12A rating has been something of a blessing and a curse for UK cinema-going audiences. On the one hand, it has permitted the exercising of parental responsibility when deciding if a child can cope with material intended for 12-year-olds and over, and has undoubtedly increased the box office takings of films carrying a 12A certificate. For example, how many extra tickets were sold for all of the Bond films released since Die Another Day because dads took their 10-year-old sons to see them? But in some instances, the new rating has come with a price. It is not an uncommon occurrence for filmmakers to tailor their films to fit the 12A bracket, usually through the use of advice screenings that sometimes lead to cuts being made at the suggestion of the BBFC. Would a film like A Good Day to Die Hard have been changed so extensively for a 12A rating in the days before the rating was advisory? We shall never know. As it stands, the 12A has at least brought us closer in line to the rest of the English-speaking world and its film classifications. One day perhaps we shall see the 15 or 18 ratings for cinema releases become advisory, as is the case in Ireland, which has a 15A rating for example. The MA15 Plus rating in Australia is a corresponding equivalent, and the American R rating is, in effect, a 17A, where under 17s must be accompanied by an adult. Are advisory classifications the way forward? Interestingly enough, former BBFC President Andreas Whittam-Smith gave an interview to the Independent on Sunday newspaper a few days before leaving the board in July 2002, where he predicted that
in the very long term, all ratings will be advisory. It will all happen in a 10-year period.
Those 10 years, of course, have long since passed, and the 15 and 18 ratings are still legally restricted. The notion to make these ratings advisory has been discussed internally by the BBFC since then, but as of now, they are reluctant to make the 15 or the 18 ratings advisory for cinema releases in the UK. This month, Cutting Edge presents a case study examining Britain's introduction of the 12A rating in 2002, as well as looking at Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy. Now there's a plane. Oh, for a soundproof room. As we discussed in a previous episode of the show, there were lots of guinea pigs chewing things in their house. The PG-13, an advisory rating, served to inform parents that another plane is passing over. Ah dear. In terms of permitted content, the 12A rating is identical to 12, with the number indicating that the film is suitable for those 12 and over, and the A signifying that adult accompaniment is accompaniment, and the A signifying that adult accompaniment is required for those under the age of 12. Accompaniment. That's a weird word. But as of now, they are reluctant to make the 15 or the 18 ratings advisory for cinema releases in the UK. We'll be back next month. Yeah,